Hey there, it's Rachel Mullins, the host of Hashtag No Filter Fridays on Public House Media.
Strike three, you're out.
Welcome back once again, ladies and gentlemen, to Caught Listening. It's part of the Public House Media Network. Christian Heimall here with you, the show that covers baseball beyond the foul lines, as we talk anything and everything associated with this wonderful, wonderful sport. And I'm so excited about this week's show, which, by the way, you can find on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your listening entertainment. You can find us, and you can find us on social media as well. Just search Caught Listening by Public House Media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. But as everybody knows, February, of course, Black History Month, and one of the most important parts about baseball, the history of the sport, really does focus in on the Negro Leagues. And I'm really excited about today's guest because the Negro Leagues in 2020, celebrating the 100-year anniversary of the Negro Leagues. But more importantly, some people, and this may be of no fault of their own, but are unaware as to exactly where the Negro League Baseball Museum is. It is located in Kansas City, and we are fortunate and honored to have Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro League Baseball Museum, joining us this week from Kansas City, where I assume, Bob, again, thanks so much for the time, but I assume the celebration is still going on from the Super Bowl.
Oh, man, it is. Big parade today. Chiefs Kingdom is out in full force, braving some frigid temperatures, but I don't think anybody is really concerned about the weather today. And, it's exciting for our city to reclaim a Super Bowl champion 50 years later. Yeah. And so, as you can imagine, Chiefs fever is running rampant here in Kansas City. But it also gives us an opportunity to talk about the history of winning in this city. And when you talk about the history of winning sports in this city, it goes back to the great Kansas City Monarchs, who were a part of the original 8 Negro League franchises established here in Kansas City in 1920 when the leagues were formed. And so this city has had a long legacy of greatness as it relates to sports champions. But again, it starts with great Kansas City Monarchs.
It certainly doesn't, and it's amazing. One of the things, baseball is such a sport that is time tested. Is the word that gets used quite a bit when talking about this wonderful game. The history of it, we pay homage to the history so much. Yet, on the national landscape, at times it feels as though the Negro Leagues kind of get lost in that, especially with some of them were. Like, for instance, I'll give you a prime example. I used to go to a lot of Newark Bears games, which used to play at Bears and Eagles Riverfront Stadium in Newark, and that was a beautiful, gorgeous stadium, and the location was wonderful, and to see the history that was memorialized there on the walls of that stadium, it almost felt like it was kind of lost in some of those cities. But what did the Negro Leagues mean to the future, to the current state of baseball as we know it?
Oh, it plays a pivotal role. The Negro Leagues, after the integration of the game with Jackie Robinson, who a lot of people, Kristen, did not know, began his career in the Negro Leagues with the great Kansas City Monarchs. Yeah, I think people think Jackie just walked out of nowhere and started playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. But his real rookie season was 1945 here in Kansas City. And we're so fond of saying, and we're very proud of the fact that it was our great city and the Negro Leagues that gave America arguably its greatest hero in Jackie Robinson. But as Jackie breaks the color barrier and has success, and now other players, other African-American and Hispanic players are able to now transition over into the Major Leagues, the Major Leagues probably saw its greatest influx of talent over about a 14, 15-year period as it has in the history of this sport. And the more majority of them were former Negro League players. I tell people all the time, one of my favorite facts that you'll see displayed at the Negro Leagues Museum, and it's eye-opening for a lot of people, but I think it also gives you an indication of, again, the impact, the immediate impact that the Negro Leagues had on Major League Baseball. From 1949 until 1959, 9 of 11 National League MVPs were former Negro League stars. And you have to understand that the National League was far more aggressive in signing black players than the American League. And the American League was very slow. And so, of course, Boston would become the last team to integrate in 1959 when they signed the late Pumpsy Green, who sadly we lost late last year. And so that completes the integration cycle. But again, remarkably, 9 of 11 over that time span were former Negro Leaguers. And that's not counting the Rookie of the Years that were also included in that group as well. So you can see the immediate impact that the Negro Leagues had on Major League Baseball. But then it just makes you wonder, what would have happened had the doors opened sooner? And it kind of leaves you scratching your head, because I think as baseball fans, man, we were cheated. We should have seen all the great stars take the field together.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you almost wonder, just with regards to that, some of the, how long would have Jackie's career been? What players before Jackie would have made lasting impacts on this game? What records might still be held by some of those players before Jackie came in? And it's something that is quite incredible to go back and look at. And again, baseball being one of those sports that so, tightly holds on to its history, you almost look at some of the what ifs and kind of forget about them somewhat.
No question. My dear friend, and I bring him up all the time, my dear friend, the late, great Monty Irvin, who, of course, was also a pioneer in this sport. And I wish Major League Baseball would have gotten Monty Irvin when he was 20, 21 years old, because there was nothing that Monty Irvin could not do. But Monty Irvin, I tell people, think about this just for a second. The two greatest living major leaguers today, and I think you get very little debate about that, Henry Aaron, who's celebrating his 86th birthday as we are recording this today, and Willie Mays.
Yeah.
I don't think you get very much argument from anybody that they're the two greatest living major leaguers today. Well, both of them come out of the Negro Leagues. And I think it gives you just a sample of the talent that was there in the Negro Leagues. And so when someone who I have the utmost admiration for, Monty Irvin, says, I played with Willie Mays, and he mentored Willie Mays when they were both there with the New York Giants, and I played against Henry Aaron, and neither of them are Josh Gibson. And it just makes you wonder, damn, how good was Josh Gibson? You wanted to see this.
Yeah.
And we didn't get that opportunity, and obviously one of the things I always take, kind of pet peeve of mine, and I know people mean well, they'll say, well, it's a shame that nobody saw these guys play. No, there were a lot of somebodies that saw them play. The more majority of them just happened to be black, because they were filling up ballparks all over the country. But what we missed was seeing the very best of the best, the creme de la creme, black, white, brown, all take the field together. And it just makes you wonder how much better our game would have been had those doors opened before 1947. And as I tell our guests all the time, they didn't learn how to play baseball after 1947. They were playing great baseball well before 1947. And there were a litany of guys who were playing in the Negro Leagues who would have been stars in any league.
100%. We're talking with Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro League Baseball Museum based in Kansas City. There's a wonderful book written by Robert and Jenna Santelli called The Baseball Fan's Bucket List, 162 Things You Must Do, See, Get, and Experience Before You Die. One of those things that is listed in there is visiting the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City. As the president, tell us a little bit about what some things people can see when they walk through those doors and they take a walk around.
Man, it's special. It really is. And I think for those of us who, what I love is that you don't have to be a baseball fan. If you are a fan of American history, you're going to love the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. If you are a fan of the underdog overcoming adversity to go on to greatness, you're going to love the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. But man, if you are a baseball fan to boot, you are in hog heaven, because it marries the best of all those worlds. And I do think the work that we've done, the Negro Leagues Museum turns 30 this year. So while we celebrate the milestone 100th anniversary of the birth of those leagues, born right here in Kansas City in 1920, this great museum that's been taking care of this history turns 30 this year. And so I do think the work that we've done over the course of 30 years, people now come to the museum expecting to meet some pretty good baseball players. And, of course, you're going to leave not being disappointed. You're going to meet some of the greatest baseball players to ever put on a baseball uniform. But you know what I think surprises people, Christian, is the fact that by the time you walk away from that experience, you walk away, I believe, with a greater, deeper, richer appreciation for just how great this country really is. Because this story could have only happened in America.
Yep.
And so while it is anchored in the ugliness of American segregation, what comes out of that adversity is this wonderful story of triumph and conquest based on one small, simple principle. You won't let me play with you, I create a league of my own. And so when our guests come, they get an opportunity to see basically how our country became better. You watch the social rise of America while you're watching the rise and subsequent fall of the Negro Leagues. And along that journey, you meet these great athletes, you meet these great baseball executives, you learn about the legacy of Rube Foster, who formed these leagues in 1920, the brilliance of all these athletes and talent and great minds that were there that built what became the third largest black-owned business enterprise in this country during that era of American segregation. And then ultimately it takes you all the way through Jackie Robinson's breaking of the color barrier, and we tell the story through a wonderful collection of photographs, artifacts, great scriptive pieces. And so it really is a nostalgic trip back in time. You feel it. You really do. And of course, the centerpiece is the Field of Legends, which features these 10 life-size bronze sculptures of Negro League greats, and they represent the first 10 Negro League players to be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame, and they're cast in position as if they're playing a game. And I think it's one of the most compelling displays in any museum anywhere in the country. And I tell you, when our guests walk out on that field, they feel it. There's a sense of pride. There's a sense of dignity. There's a sense of accomplishment. And I think it all relates back to the passion that these athletes had for the game.
Really helps kind of deepen the idea of baseball as America's pastime, because it is truly kind of that American story as you talk about, coming from, again, you won't let me play with you, fine, I'll create it myself, and I'll create it in an area that you're going to want to be a part of it now all of a sudden.
Yeah, and that was really the prevailing spirit. So sometimes I think people come to the Negro Leagues Museum and they think they're going to be introduced to a sad, somber kind of story. Because, again, we immediately relate this story to the ugliness of American segregation,
right?
Which was a horrible chapter in this country's history. But we don't treat it in that manner. We truly treat it as a celebration. Yeah, it's the celebration, as I oftentimes say, of the power of the human spirit to persevere and prevail. And it's that triumphant nature that people can kind of relate to. And I think it's also what makes this story, in my estimation, a story that embodies the American spirit, unlike any story in the annals of American history. And so while America was trying to prevent them from sharing in the joys of her so-called national pastime, it was indeed the American spirit that allowed them to persevere and prevail. So they never cried about the social injustice. None of them. No, you couldn't convince them that they weren't playing the best baseball that was being played in this country. Now, everybody else thought that the best baseball was being played in the Major League. But I don't know if you could ever convince them that they weren't playing the best baseball that was being played in this country. And they wanted to prove to the world that they were as good as anyone playing this game. And I think that's that spirit that you see there. So amidst the hardships, now they didn't like the fact that they could go into a town, fill up the ballpark, and yet not be able to get a meal from the same fans who had just cheered them, or not have a place to stay. So no, they didn't like that, but they would never allow that adversity to kill their love of the game. And to me, that's what makes the story so special and so compelling and so rich.
It really is. It's exciting to hear you talk about it, too, and the pictures and the website does not do it justice by any stretch of the imagination. Again, talking with Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum here on Caught Listening. I want to talk to you about what's happening this year, because you mentioned 30 years of the museum, but starting next week, you guys will really hit full stride with your year-long celebration of the 100th anniversary of the birth of the Negro Leagues with a new exhibition, Black Baseball in Living Color, The Art of Craig Kreindler. Give us a little bit of a snippet as to what fans are going to be able to see this year, if this is the year they decide to first make it, or if they're making another trip back to the museum.
Yeah, and we hope for those that are making a return visit, you're going to see some incredible new things that we're doing, and we're so excited about this 100th anniversary. It's one of the most significant things, I think, to ever happen to the Negro Leagues Museum since the birth of our museum in 1990, the opening of our current home in 1997, and sadly the death of the late, great Buck O'Neil in 2006. And this, because this elevates the museum on a level that I think will put it in the eyes and minds of many people, as you mentioned in your lead, that had never heard of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. So this is an important celebration for us, as you well know, and so Greg Kreindler's exhibition is amazing, and for those of you who may not be familiar with him, he's probably one of the best baseball artists in the country, and he's put together a series of paintings on the Negro Leagues, and he does, I'm going to act like I know what I'm talking about, because I really don't, because, I can appreciate art, but I really don't have any idea how these guys do this stuff, but he's put together what he calls a series of color studies. And so he's essentially taken these old photographs, which existed, but they existed in black and white. And through the historical research, he goes back, identifies the color of the uniforms, and in some cases, even the pigmentation of the athletes that he's depicting, and he brings them to life in full color, which is why I call the exhibit Black Baseball in Living Color. And so over 220 of these pieces will be on display at the museum inside of our changing gallery, along with some other artifacts on loan to the museum by historian Jay Cardwell. And so we will open that exhibit officially to the public on November 14th in a private capacity on February 14th, in a private capacity on February 13th, which is the actual 100th anniversary. We also are planning a special commemoration of the birth of the Negro Leagues. And this happened right around the corner from where the museum operates, the old Paseo YMCA. That is where Rube Foster and a contingent of 8 independent black baseball team owners met in that historic landmark to establish the Negro National League, February 13, 1920. So 100 years from that exact date, we're going right back into the Paseo YMCA to commemorate what we believe to be one of the most significant occurrences, not in baseball history, but in American history. And I am so excited that we've got literally a dream team of those who are going to be there to help us commemorate this special occasion. And just to drop a few names, people are like, Bob, you always dropping names. Yeah, but, I am. I'm name dropping. We got the commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, who is scheduled to be there. The head of Major League Baseball's Player Association, Tony Clark, is scheduled to be here with us on February 13th. The brand new owner of our great Kansas City Royals, John Sherman, will join us for this commemoration. The mayor of our great city, Quentin Lucas, will be there for this commemoration, as will former Kansas City Royal and now Jackson County executive in Kansas City, sits in Jackson County, Frank White, is joining us. The lieutenant governor of the state of Missouri will be here for this ceremony. So you can get a feel for just how important this is. And this means a great deal to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And so to go back into that old building 100 years later and have this group of distinguished guests join us, I think sends a resounding message to the public about how special this anniversary date is, and of course the work that we're doing here at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum to preserve and celebrate and educate and hopefully inspire a future generation as it relates to the story of the Negro Leagues. And then, of course, we will announce in full detail many of our plans, including an exciting announcement with Major League Baseball and their recognition of this special anniversary. So, yeah, February 13th is going to be a big day for us, and a lot of events and activities scheduled throughout the course of the year, one of which I'm excited about is the fact that the first official Negro Leagues game was played May 2nd, 1920 in Indianapolis between the Indianapolis ABCs and the Chicago American Giants. And so we have plans to go back to Naptown and commemorate that game. But one of the league's first big superstars was a guy named Oscar Charleston. And to put it in perspective, the late, great Buck O'Neil, who saw so many players from the Negro Leagues and Major League, you know, for those who may not be familiar with Buck, he was a star for the Kansas City Monarchs from 1938 to 1955. But as a scout, he signed Hall of Famers Ernie Banks, Lou Brock, recent Hall of Famer Lee Arthur Smith, hopefully future Hall of Famer Joe Carter. And Buck was involved in the game for 7 decades. So he saw a lot. And he would say, without hesitation, that Oscar Charleston was the greatest baseball player he ever saw, and that he was Willie Mays before we ever knew who Willie Mays was. and many of the old-timers say that the closest thing to Oscar Charleston would have been Willie Mays, which is also frightening. And Oscar Charleston, in 1921, led the Negro Leagues in home runs, triples, doubles, stolen bases, and batting average in the same season. And if you are going to compare him to a Major League contemporary, he had the defensive abilities of Tris Speaker, the tenacity of Ty Cobb, and the bat of Babe Ruth rolled into one dynamic package. And so we recently learned that the great Oscar Charleston, who served his country in the U.S. Army when he was 15 years old, is buried in a relatively nondescript grave site in a cemetery in Indianapolis. And it is the quest of the Negro Leagues Museum to go back and not only commemorate that first official game, but also to put a proper headstone on the gravesite of the legendary Oscar Charleston, who is in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. He is in center field inside the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And Buck O'Neil says he never saw a center fielder who could go back on a ball the way Charleston could. Just uncanny instincts. And so this will be a special commemoration for us, and I hope for the baseball community at large as we go back to Indianapolis, commemorate that game, but even more importantly, put a proper headstone on the gravesite of the legendary Oscar Charleston.
It's incredible, not only preserving the history of something like this, but you know, because again, we talked about it earlier, but it's the untold history of baseball as a sport in America, not just Major League Baseball, which is truthfully incredible and amazing to see what you all are doing. One thing I want to ask you about here before I let you go, Mr. Kendrick, you know, you talk about hopefully energizing future generations. And, you know, one of the things I've always felt with Major League Baseball is they have a little bit of a marketing issue in not being able to market their stars on a national level. And one of them, probably, in my opinion, the second best baseball player in the game today, Mookie Betts, being traded from the Red Sox over to the Dodgers, but then also having someone who has been around baseball for so long as Dusty Baker back in baseball, managing the Houston Astros now. What those two gentlemen, or gentlemen of that caliber, meaning not just to the history of baseball, but to the future of baseball as well.
Well, I think it's vitally important, and so I'm so happy for Dusty, who's a great friend of ours, and I think a brilliant baseball manager, to have another opportunity to manage
100%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I'm thrilled for him. Mookie has been a friend of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum for many years. Every year when the Boston Red Sox come to town to play the Royals, the Red Sox always have a delegation of folks who would come by and visit. Mookie, Jackie Bradley, and many of the other players have made their way to the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. So I'm excited for him that he'll be in one of the biggest markets in baseball there in Los Angeles, and they'll get a chance to see him do what he does as well as anyone. He's an immense talent. You know, I mean, you're always surprised when a talent the magnitude of Mookie Betts gets traded in this kind of this crazy economic climate of baseball. But I'm super excited for him. But it's great because that platform kind of grows, and hopefully other kids can see this African-American talent that's playing. And that's part of the connection that we share with Major League Baseball, who's working obviously extremely hard to diversify this game, to make sure that there is inclusiveness amongst all kids who want to play this game, but particularly those African-American kids who have kind of drifted from our sport, and some of it is economically related. And so they're making these inroads so that kids have an opportunity. But, well, you think about the role of the Negro Leagues Museum. We have an urban youth baseball academy right behind the museum that was built by Major League Baseball, the Kansas City Royals, Players Association, City of Kansas City, State of Missouri, Negro Leagues Baseball Museum as a partner. And it was Dayton Moore's brilliant idea to have this academy at historic 18th and Vine right behind the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, because he understood, as we well know, that it's one thing to try and get kids to play this game, but it's another thing when you see yourself in the game. And so when they come to the Negro Leagues Museum, they not only, they see people who look just like them, who played the game as well as anyone ever played the game. But they not only played the game, they owned teams. They were managers. They were coaches. They were team physicians. They were traveling secretaries. They fulfilled every aspect of the business of the game of baseball. And that is just as important as we keep trying to develop not only future baseball players, but future baseball fans. And so I think the Negro League Museum plays an important role in this as well. But I'm so happy for Dusty, and I'm ecstatic for Mookie. He's a great young man, obviously an immense talent. I'm sure the city of Boston is disappointed to lose Mookie, because not only was he good as a player, he was good there in the Boston community as well. And so, but, you know, the Dodgers come to Kansas City this year. And so interleague play brings to the Kansas City. Our salute to the Negro Leagues is the weekend that they are in Kansas City. And so I'm excited about the possibility of getting to see Mookie and, of course, Dave Roberts and many other great guys that are there with that Dodger organization. And so it'll be a historic celebration the weekend of May 15th, 16th, and 17th when the Dodgers are in town to play the Royals. And David Price, who it's hard to imagine that David Price was almost a throw-in in this trade. And and David has been a longtime friend of the museum, and so I'm happy for both of those guys because they're not only great baseball players, they're great people.
Yeah, growing up as a Red Sox fan, we're not going to talk about that trade right now. But Bob, I can't thank you enough for the time. And one thing that I really do want to stress to all of our listeners is the fact that the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So please visit nlbm.com, donate, and make a trip to Kansas City just to go see the museum. If you're passing through, you know, they call them flyover states, but please drive through, stop in, and see the amazing work that you guys are doing. Bob, I appreciate it so much. Congratulations on 30 years with the museum, and best of luck this year in all you guys are doing to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much for having me on the show, and don't let it be one and done, man. Invite me back.
Absolutely will. And you know what we'll do? We'll plan a trip where we'll come out there and we'll talk face to face. We'll take some pictures and have some fun out there as well.
Looking forward to it, Kristen. Thank you so much.
It's Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Just a lot of fun talking with him. And again, this is what we want to bring you guys on the show every single week, is not just the headlines, not just what's being talked about between the white lines, but the history of the game, some of the things that maybe don't get discussed enough, and really hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, nlbm.com. Go there, check out the website. When you visit Kansas City, and if you haven't planned on it, maybe this is the summer to go, check out the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum there in Kansas City. Should be a lot of fun, and we appreciate Bob's time and look forward to having him on again in the future. All right, time to play a little bit of Pepper like we do every single week. You guys send us your listener questions on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by searching Caught Listening by Public House Media, or you can also email the show, caughtlisteningphm@gmail.com. A couple quick hitter questions here for you guys. James in Ohio. Pete Rose has submitted for his reinstatement into Major League Baseball, citing the Astros allegation. Should he get it? Look, I've been wanting Pete Rose back in baseball for a very, very long time. I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I think he is, he is statistically and unequivocally the greatest, hitter of all time. He's the hit king. He has more hits than anybody else. He and his agent, his lawyers, have said that his lifetime ban is, quote, vastly disproportionate when compared with Major League Baseball's punishments of players who took performance-enhancing drugs and the players involved in the sign-stealing schemes. Here's the problem, though, and this is why I think you will never see Pete Rose put back into Major League Baseball and eligible for the Baseball Hall of Fame. He violated, even though he never admitted to it, he violated Section D of Major League Baseball's Rule 21, which prohibits players and others involved with the game from betting on baseball. The sign stealing wasn't technically breaking the law until they put it in. The steroids weren't technically breaking the law until these things happened. But what Pete was doing was already illegal under the bylaws of Major League Baseball. And therefore, he broke a rule that is, up for judgment to be suspended for life. And so, as much as I want him in the Hall of Fame, as much as I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, I don't think you'll ever see it because, again, he actually violated a rule that was already in place before his actions, before the actions he committed. If it had been something like steroids, like this science thing where the rules were already in place beforehand, I could see it. I could see to have a bigger argument. But, again, this was stuff that was already against the rules. He knew what he was doing. He did it wrong, and therefore he does not deserve to be, in the Hall of Fame, does not deserve to be reinstated in the eyes of Major League Baseball. I think he should be because I want him there. I think it's important to tell his story, and I don't want Pete Rose's story and his record to die with him when that happens, hopefully in the very distant future. Who knows? Maybe we'll see. There are a lot of people, voters in the Hall of Fame, who don't really care about this anymore, and maybe the sentiment will change. I don't see it happening in Pete's lifetime, to be 100% honest, though, and I think that's a little bit sad. But I can understand where Major League Baseball is coming from and why he won't get reinstated, and I honestly have to agree with it. So let's see here. Eric in Massachusetts, thoughts on the Mookie Betts trade for the Red Sox and who the real winner in this deal is. Here, the real winner, to be 100% honest, this is probably going to surprise some people, but it's the Twins. It's the Twins in all of this because it's one of those things. Don't get me wrong. The Red Sox had to put Mookie Betts in so someone will take David Price's contract. This is not about getting rid of Mookie Betts. This is about getting rid of the contract of David Price more than anything else. Getting rid of Mookie Betts was a travesty. It is the wrong thing. It is awful. It is a terrible trade for the Boston Red Sox. You give up, in my opinion, the second best player in the game in Mookie Betts for literally nothing. Alex Verdugo, a minor league outfielder who had back problems last year. That's the last thing you want, is an outfielder who had back problems. Yes, he was great when he came up until he got hurt. But getting hurt like that is really, really scary for me, especially for a kid as young as Verdugo is. Secondly, when you go and you get this kid, Brusdar Graterol, who is the 83rd best prospect in Major League Baseball from the Twins, and he automatically becomes the Red Sox second best prospect. He's got a 100-mile-an-hour sinker, but can't strike guys out. He doesn't do it at a very, very high level. The 21-year-old, 6'1", 265, last year, 10 games in relief, 1-1 with a 4.66 ERA. You hope he gets better, yes, but that is nowhere near the return that you're looking for when you're trading away, in my opinion, the second best player in all of Major League Baseball. The biggest thing for the Red Sox, and this is the travesty of it, you're the freaking Red Sox. You don't need to be getting salary cap or luxury tax reprieve. You don't need to be trying to be fiscally responsible. You're the Red Sox, for God's sakes. This is a team that has consistently been the best team over the last 15 years in Major League Baseball. Yes, the David Price deal did not work out, but you know what? You got a World Series out of it. Did you need to sign Chris Sale to that massive extension? No. And guess what? Sale's hurt. Who knows if he's ever going to be the same again? That's going to backfire, and that's part of the reason why you can't afford Mookie Betts. But here's the interesting part, and here is the one grain of salt that, as a Red Sox fan growing up, I'm holding on to this glimmer of hope. You can still sign Mookie Betts in the offseason. He's a free agent. In a perfect scenario, Verdugo's great. He comes up and he provides a tremendous asset to this organization this year. And maybe you get something out of this Gratterall kid. And he becomes a relief pitcher. He becomes a quality relief man, or maybe even an opener with Heimall calling the shots now. And then maybe you go and you can sign Mookie Betts. Because according to multiple sources, he told Jim Rice Boston is home and that's where he wants to play. So the Red Sox are huge losers in this right now. Who knows? We may find out they're not. The Dodgers, in my opinion, aren't the winners in this either. Don't get me wrong. They put together a tremendous lineup of Mookie Betts at the top, Muncy, Turner, Bellinger, Pollock, Seager, Lux, Will Smith. Trading Jock Peterson and Stripling to the Angels, not great. And adding David Price to a rotation with Walker Buehler, who you don't know if he's going to be able to sustain his stuff all year long. Alex Wood, Clayton Kershaw, who's had his postseason troubles as well. You've got a lineup, a rotation that 4 out of 5 are lefties. And if, let's just say they make it to the World Series again, you're likely going to face either the Houston Astros or the New York Yankees. The New York Yankees have one left-handed hitter in that lineup against lefty pitching, and they dominate David Price. David Price, 15 and 16 all-time against the Yankees with an ERA north of 5. If it's a Dodgers-Yankees World Series, Price should not be on that roster for the Dodgers' sake. So you don't really help yourself there in terms of you were a 106-win team in the regular season. You needed postseason pitching, not more offense. So to get to the actual question, which was who's the winner, it leaves one team, and that's the Twins. Getting Kenta Maeda and adding him to a Twins lineup, a Twins roster that was very good last year, obviously did as tremendous as they possibly could, is very, very important for them. Very, very big. But you look at who they have in their rotation. When you add Homer Bailey, you add Jose Barrios, you add Tyler Duffy, there's some talent in there. Rich Hill, who signed in the offseason, Jake Odorizzi, Michael Pineda, if they're all healthy. And you add Kenta Maeda, this is a talented Twins rotation now to go along with a team that hit 307 home runs last year. And oh, by the way, added Josh Donaldson. The Twins are the winners in this one because in an AL Central that, in my opinion, is very much up for grabs, the Twins put themselves now as a front runner to win that division. Maybe win a divisional series, who knows? But in my opinion, the Twins are the winners out of this trade deal. We'll see exactly how that all plays out, but that's the way I see it. So, quick game of pepper, as we said. Not a lot there to go over, but we appreciate you guys being a part of this organization and being a part of this show, as always, every single week. You can find us Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Search us Caught Listening by Public House Media. You can also email the show caughtlisteningphm@gmail.com. Don't forget, you can find this show wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, iHeartRadio as well. Brand new merchandise. Head to our social media pages, and you can get the link to purchase some awesome Caught Listening gear, some hoodies, some shirts, coffee mugs, stickers, phone cases, anything and everything you could possibly want from the baseball show that goes beyond the white lines. Big thanks to Bob Kendrick, president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, for joining the show. I'm Christian Heimall. You can find me on Twitter as well, at Chris Heimall, ChrisHeimall, and you have been Caught Listening.